can hear them. Okay.
Well, welcome to our classroom, and we really appreciate you coming in this busy legislative session, being willing to speak with our class. It's really an honor, and we looked through the bill that you sponsored, and Mr. Tower has spoken on their behalf. So we do have some questions about it. We were kind of wondering if you could speak about what it was like to talk in committee, Mr. Tower, and also if you could, tell us a little bit about what led to the drafting of this.
Got it. Well, it was a very positive bill. There were a lot of people that came and spoke to different aspects of the bill. The committee really appreciated your class perspective. The fact that I shared with them that you guys had experiences with vaping actually in the middle school was a bit of a surprise to some of them. And I shared, the supposition that the people who would not be smoking, the 18 to 21-year-olds, would have that money available for other uses, as opposed to what some people were saying, which is this would just be a loss of sales, that they would go somewhere else or not spend that money. It was a good hearing, and I got thanked by a number of individuals afterwards that work in healthcare, some of the insurance folks, and of course the prime sponsor of the legislation, who wanted to come and chat about it here. So this is Representative Paul Harris, and he's a good friend. We've been working together for about 10 years now.
Yeah, several issues.
Yeah, and Paul has been on the healthcare committee for quite some time, and so he's very active in healthcare issues like this. The holdup on this bill with the Tobacco 21 piece is probably not the healthcare policy. It's the financial.
It's the money.
The money issue.
The money.
So I brought him today to share what it's like to actually be the person to introduce the legislation, to get to talk in caucus, and kind of his background on why he introduced the legislation in the first place.
Okay. So for me, it's mostly just about healthcare and making sure that, especially youth, what we find out is that youth that start smoking between the ages of 18 and 21 specifically will have a far more difficult time stopping smoking in their lives. And it's a very impressionable time in your life as far as just your healthcare in general. So if you start smoking between 18 and 21, it will impact you for a long, long time. So for me, it was mostly just about healthcare. I wasn't looking at the dollars, although everybody else is looking at the dollars now. So, yeah.
Well, and we talked about fiscal notes, and I think in this case that the idea that we're somehow going to lose money is not legitimate, but the way that they have to draft up the fiscal note so that the legislature looks at it and says, how much money is it going to cost us in the budget? It looks like we're going to lose a lot of money by not selling cigarettes to people that are 18 to 21.
They assume that everyone's going to stop smoking, and I wish that was true, but reality is looking at New York and a couple of other places that have done this, it's sad to say that most of them don't quit smoking, especially immediately. So, yeah. So next week, on Monday next week, I will introduce a tax on vaping products, a 60% tax that will backfill most of the money that we're going to lose from smoking 21. It'll take about 2 years. And then after that, the tax on basically all the vaping products will make up the difference of what we're losing on cigarette products. So I'll actually introduce that next Monday.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you for them, what's it like to have a caucus discussion? So you guys know when I come down here, I get to testify in front of the committee, and I get to talk to people in their offices, and I go and talk to them individually. What I don't get to do is go behind the doors when the Republicans or the Democrats decide they're gonna talk amongst themselves and kind of work through whether a bill is something that they're going to support as a group, whether they're going to go out and vote their own conscience, or whether they're going to fight, to keep it from coming up. So I'm kind of curious how did the conversation around Tobacco 21 go in your caucus?
So I'm a Republican, and so I'm going to introduce a tax which most of the majority of my caucus will not like. Republicans in general don't like raising taxes. So they knew all along, my 48 members knew all along that at some point I would probably have to introduce a tax to make this bill viable. So on the healthcare side, I think most of my 48 members are with me. I would say out of the 48, I will probably have 30 of them that would agree with me. On the tax issue, though, that'll become a much more difficult issue for the majority of my members. And so probably I might have 10 of my members that will sign on to the bill. It'll be interesting. I will start working that next week. So it'd be just like you in your classroom today. If you had a view that you believed in, and how many are in your classroom? 20, 15?
30.
30. Oh my gosh, we have a big classroom there. So out of your 30, it'd be interesting to see how many of them would agree with you on a specific issue. So it's the same in my caucus. I stand up and talk to my caucus, explain the bill, ask for signatures on the bill if they'll help me with the bill. And so initially when I introduced the bill, I had 12 of my members that signed on to the bill. Realizing I ran this bill last year and I only had 6 of my members that would sign on. So I think all these bills will gain momentum, even though it didn't pass last time. And I'm not sure it's going to pass this time. I think I can get it out of my House. But if you know how it works up here, I got to get it through the Senate. And the Senate's going to be a much more difficult sale than the House. Yeah. So, yeah.
So Carol, go ahead.
We have a bunch of students who have questions for him. Would you like?
Sure.
You know,
Absolutely.
great. Okay. So Martha, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a question about, do you visit like any classrooms in Snohomish County ever?
I couldn't.
She was asking if you visit classrooms in Snohomish County. So, yeah, maybe explain where you're from.
So Representative Harris is from Vancouver, Washington. Do you know where Vancouver's at?
Yeah.
Okay, I live right on the Columbia River. I live at milepost 1, so I look over at Oregon is where I literally do. So have I been up in your area? I actually have. I worked up in that area for a little bit, but I don't get up there very often. No.
So, and by the way, so the next time we get together, I'm going to bring with me one of your senators from your area who actually lives right down the road from your middle school. But in this case, it was, because Paul was very grateful that you guys sent me down to testify in favor of his bill. I thought it was a really good idea to talk about the policy.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hello there. My name is Eva, and I have a question. You two explained at the beginning why you were both for raising the tobacco age to 21, and you had personal reasons in addition to reasons why it would be good for everyone, especially the youth. Do you always have these such strong reasons, or is it normally personal motives that take you to sponsor a bill?
That's interesting. I think when you believe so vaping and smoking to me is something I am very passionate on. So I have sponsored bills where people like a lobbyist will come to me and say, "Hey, Paul, I've got this bill I'm interested in. Would you run the bill?" And oftentimes I will. But this particular bill is something that I'm really passionate on. And I will, if this bill doesn't pass this year, I'm in for 2 more years. I'm in for another year for sure, because I was just reelected. So I will be back again next year with this same bill, working some different members, probably more on the Senate side, because I think that's where my problem's going to be. So if you understand legislation, I pass it out of the House, then it goes over to the Senate, and I got to get it through the Senate. And I think in the Senate, I'm having to have a bigger lift. But it's a great question. I think I did all sorts of bills. I did 2 other bills this year that will impact you later in life in your high school. I wanted to delink testing from graduation. So that passed in the House just this last week, which means that when you take your tests, it won't count towards your graduation. Is the state, so that's a big deal. And then also I worked on a bill that's going to take some more work to reduce credit hours required at high school from 24 to 21. That's another important bill. So Am I as passionate on those bills? I'm pretty passionate on reducing credit hours. So I will continue to work on that. So, but sometimes we do bills that people just ask us to do. And so good question. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of times that there are just little cleanups or technical things that everybody generally agrees to that you can get done, but it still takes the time and attention because the process is designed to be very thoughtful and to have everybody have a chance to give their opinions on things. So when there's something that's a big deal like this, I think the combination that is required is someone who cares deeply about it, being the primary sponsor, and the patience to get through multiple years, because something like Tobacco 21 doesn't happen the first time that you introduce it.
No.
Except in very, very rare occasions.
Yeah.
What do you think will pass this year?
What do I think? What will
What do you
pass?
think will pass?
I mean, just on this bill or just in general?
In general?
Okay. Wow. I think the delinking bill that I just talked about has a really good chance of passing. I've got to go over and work Senator Fain. I got a couple senators over there that don't agree with me. So I got to go over there and work them. But I think in general, I think delinking might pass, which will be a big deal to you down the line.
What about education funding? I mean,
Oh, okay. So I'm on the Educational Funding Task Force. So I'm one of 8 that's working on the McCleary decision. So we have met a couple of times. Your teacher can probably talk to you a little bit about the levy cliff. We just passed that yesterday. But the McCleary decision, so I'm one of 8 that sits on that task force. I think we have a really good opportunity this year of resolving that. I think all sides, all 4 chambers, want the Supreme Court out of our lives. I can tell you Representative Harris wants the Supreme Court out of his life. So I'm going to work very hard to get that done.
So just to give you guys some background, in case you haven't already discussed it, the Supreme Court told the legislature that they had to fully fund what they defined as basic education. So your school is funded by a combination of money that comes from the state and money that comes from your local, your neighborhoods with property taxes and such. And sometimes those property taxes are used for things that we consider to be basic rights of students. Well, the Supreme Court said that that's not appropriate. And so the legislature has to go through and redefine how they're going to pay for schools.
Brad's being way too nice.
Well,
So those local levies were never supposed to be used for basic education, and that's the whole issue. So when they passed local levies, they were to go to certain things. Well, in our accounting processes at our districts and they started using those monies because they were easier to get, and they started using them for basic education. They were never intended to do that. But now the Supreme Court has told me I've got to backfill that and make those local dollars become state dollars. That becomes pretty tricky, but we're going to do that.
Yeah, it's billions with a B.
With a B.
Of dollar, big money, and it's been about 4 years,
Oh, yeah.
5 years that the Supreme Court has told the legislature you have to do this, and it's not easy to come up with multiple billions of dollars. So they've taken a few years and they're making progress toward it. We think maybe this year
I really
actually
hope
get all the
so.
way there.
I really hope. So we're being fined every day $200,000. It's kind of mind-boggling, but we are.
I wish I had that much money.
What's interesting is, though, we put more than that into education every year, extra dollars. So I haven't too worried about the $200,000.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think they're gonna.
Hello, my name is Lisa. The tobacco bill, do you think that bill will pass?
Do I think the tobacco bill will pass? In my
The
dreams, I do, but reality can be a son of a gun. So in reality, it's going to pass the House, probably not going to pass the Senate. So it won't become law. Do I think next year I can get it done? I think next year, every year it gets better and better. So this will be the 3rd year. So this might take me 4 tries to get this done, but I'm going to get it done before I'm gone from this place. So it's something I'm pretty passionate on. I'm going to work on it for a long time.
Why is it that you think you won't pass it in the Senate for the Senate?
Well, you know, do you want me to throw some senators under the bus? Not everybody agrees. So not everybody agrees. I think they all agree that smoking's bad. But I have many senators, and I have some in my house that really believe that you have the right, as an 18-year-old, you have the right to smoke that cigarette. You have the right to serve our country. So I'm going to argue the other side. You have the right to serve our country. You should have the right to smoke that cigarette. That's basically the big issue. What's interesting on our armed services, one of the main reasons youth today cannot qualify to serve in the armed services is because they can't pass the physical. And part of that is smoking. So I think it's an odd paradigm.
Well, you know, Paul, when we were first talking about this bill, the class brought up the fact, and I had forgotten, that it wasn't that long ago that alcohol sales were 18. And we made that change all across the nation for, you know, health and safety reasons.
Well, I would use that argument, Brad, but I have some senators that are crazy enough that would probably say,
Let's roll
back the alcohol age to 18. So I hate using that argument, although it's a great argument in a way, because we looked at alcohol and realized that in our society, it probably wasn't good between the ages of 18 and 21. But we haven't done that yet with cigarettes. So I got a big lift in the Senate. I really do.
What is your personal connection to smoking?
What is my personal connection to smoking? I've never smoked in my life, but I have had cancer. So I've had cancer in my life. I've gone through radiation and chemo treatments. I had a close, dear friend die from lung cancer. He had smoked the majority of his life. He was a very, very close friend of mine. And he had quit. He smoked when he was between 16 and 40. He quit for 10 years, and at 50 got lung cancer and died at 52.
I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hi, my name is Elle, and going back to what you asked about the classrooms and the the classroom size, I was wondering what you think the appropriate class size is, and if it's bigger than, if it's bigger than 20, if it affects the education of learning.
Okay. What do I think about classroom sizes? Well, let me ask you a question back just real fast. Do you feel like 30 is too many in your classroom?
Yeah.
You do, okay. So what's interesting is what studies have told us, K through 3, so kindergarten through 3rd grade, classroom size makes a huge difference in education. I got to be honest with you, I'm surprised there's 30 in your classroom, okay? So I would think 30 is too much. I would like to see it between 20 and 22, but I think it will impact. I think you will do better if you have a personal relationship with Carol, your teacher, and she knows you well and you know her, and she's very involved in your education. And I think it's hard to do that as the numbers grow. So I think classroom size does matter.
So if someone's struggling in class, it would be better to have a smaller class so they can get more one-on-one time with the teacher?
It would, but it's really complicated. And your name again, is it Jill?
Elle.
Ella?
Elle.
So Ella, this is where school funding becomes pretty difficult, because to be honest with you, Representative Harris, we have local control over dollars. So I've given the district, in my mind, a lot of dollars. I don't tell them how to spend it, Ella. So how they're spending that money is up to them.
Okay, thank you.
But I could get very prescriptive and tell them where to spend it, Ella. Is it Ella? Am I saying your name right?
Elle.
Just L.
Elle.
Like the letter L.
Just L. Sorry. Yeah. So we don't tell. Yeah, we don't tell the districts how to spend their dollars. We give them a lot of local control, and I'm wondering if that's been the right thing to do, Elle. So we'll think about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. See if I can get this name right. I doubt it. All right.
Okay, hi, my name is Isaac, and my question is,
Hey, that doesn't look like it's your question, man. You're stealing that question.
so, Brad, you testified on the bill for lowering property tax for veteran families. Do you think that'll pass?
Well, that bill,
I didn't, what was it about property tax?
So I also testified on the class's behalf on Senate Bill 5104, which would provide a property tax exemption for the widow or widower of a service member or first responder.
Okay.
So if they were killed in the line of
Sure,
duty.
absolutely.
That one actually did pass the Senate. And again, I think, I don't know how the House is going to view that one. It's got a good possibility because when you talk about the way property taxes are collected, if we give a break to this group of folks, then the other people who pay property taxes will pick up the difference. So it doesn't mean that you have to cut somebody's job somewhere. It just means that we're going to change around who pays a little bit more and who pays a little bit less for property taxes. So that bill actually already passed the Senate, and it very well could, come all the way through this year. I haven't seen it listed for a hearing in the House just yet, but if it comes up, I will go testify on that again. I will tell you, so they didn't give me very much notice. I just happened to be there that morning. I was the only person on your behalf who actually testified in favor of that particular bill. But I had a couple of people come up afterwards who represent firefighters and first responders and others who said thank you to the class for us weighing in and supporting that bill, and asked how they said, hey, we're gonna jump in and do a little work on this and see if we can't get it passed this year.
So having not heard the bill, I would ask Brad, one, what is the fiscal impact? How many people does that happen to every year? What type of dollars am I looking at spreading across the whole system to pick up the dollars that others are going to have to pay? So that would be my big concern. Probably most likely would push the button yes for that. But like every bill, remember, when you vote yes for something, somebody else somewhere is going to be unhappy. And just like in this bill, what's happening is you're going to spread those costs over everybody. And you're going to have some widowers, and you're going to have some retired people whose property taxes are going to go up ever so slightly to cover that cost. So nothing happens without somebody else having to pay.
Yeah, in this case,
probably very minimal cost, I would assume.
It's pretty small.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the class identified was that in their lives, the first responders that they know are all kind of primary breadwinners, right, for the family. So the loss of that person is not only emotionally really difficult, but it can put a family completely on the ropes.
Oh, I'm probably your friend, but I want you to understand what the argument will be from the other side. Trust me, I've learned.
Well, and there were comments in the committee on that one, negative comments from some senators who were asking, well, what's the means test? I mean, if a very wealthy person had their spouse, was a firefighter and they died, would that person who has a $10 million home, would they get a property tax exemption? And would it be forever? So there's some concern that might be inappropriate, that some people that don't need it might get it, but I don't know that that's a big problem in not in my book anyway. Thanks, Isaac. Good question.
Hi, my name is Victoria, and so Representative Harris, my teacher told me about the bill you passed for the sunscreen in schools. What is that on?
Where's my bill? So here's, first off, a little crazy, don't you think? That we need a bill to take sunscreen to school. I love America. Don't you just love America? So my bill died in the House, and we let it die because we knew that they were going to run the bill in the Senate, and it passed the Senate. So now the sunscreen bill comes over to the House, and we're going to hear the sunscreen bill right away, and I'm assuming that bill will pass. Did that answer your question, though?
Thank you.
So a lot of times we run bills in both chambers, but if we know it's going to pass in one chamber, then we won't run it in the other chamber. We won't waste the time.
Yeah, from a lobbyist perspective, let me tell you, this is really important to have somebody who understands the importance of getting it done and is willing to let somebody else have their name at the top of the list and take the credit, because working on the Senate bill coming over is the best way to get the bill passed. But sometimes people get kind of possessive of an issue and they might fight back and forth. Even though they agree on the same policy, they could fight over who gets to take credit for it. And I've seen things die because of that. So it's great to have a sponsor like Paul who understands it's more important to get the Senate bill passed than it is to have
Absolutely.
the bill with his name on it.
And the same thing with Smoking 21. You know, sometimes your perception in the legislature, if you're not perceived as someone that can work across both sides, and I'm not sure where I'm perceived right now. It'd be interesting. If someone else can get Smoking 21 through, boy, I would let them run it, because to me, it's all about getting the legislation done. It's not about it being my bill, but it's about we need this legislation. So whoever can get the work done, I will pass the baton off and, man, get it done. So.
Why would we need a bill for sunscreen schools?
Why what?
Why do we need the bill for sunscreen schools?
We have laws that basically say that you as youth can only bring certain things to school as far as medications and as far as things that are personal items that you can bring. And it's just one of the items that happens to fall in that character. So we need to write a law to make sure that you can bring it and you can apply it.
There's a lot of stuff that I work on that is fixing problems created by earlier good intentions. So in this case, it was probably, you're not allowed to bring medication or certain kinds of applications unless you have a prescription for it. And sunscreen is one of those things that got caught up in the definition. And so now we have to change the definition.
We spend a bunch of time fixing beautiful bills that we always thought were great. We spend a lot of time fixing stuff up here, just to let you know.
Thank you.
You bet.
Did anyone want to ask this? Okay.
You got this. Come on, Ella.
So, I know traditionally Republicans don't like big government, so why do you disagree with local controls of schools?
So wait, so Republicans don't like big government, but what about schools? I didn't follow that.
So why do you disagree with local control of schools?
Well, I think you might have misunderstood. She said, why don't you agree with local control?
Oh, no. I do agree with local control typically, but here's my problem, okay? I really believe I've given so you asked me about classroom size, okay? If you look at it, we have what we call a prototypical school model, which means we take an average school that has so many teachers per student, and I have funded that. What I haven't done is I haven't literally said, here's the dollars, you're going to put it into that classroom. No, I've sent them the bucket of money to the district, and they've spent it how they like. So that's why I'm starting to wonder if I don't need to put the finger of God on them and control it better. What do you think? Do you like being controlled?
No.
No.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. And so the district's the same way. What I've asked for is actually better accounting. Do you guys know what accounting is even? I want to know where the numbers go. I want to know where the dollars are. So I've asked for stricter accounting, and that could solve part of the problem actually in and of itself.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Somebody asked a
Good
question.
job.
Good question, by the way.
All right, guys. Well, it looks like we're rolling to the end, so maybe one more question?
Yeah, we have one more question.
Great.
Hello, my name is Joel. And back to the tobacco thing. Why do you believe 21 is the correct age? Why don't you think it should be more or less?
Okay.
Good question.
I think the goal of 21 and why that age is to get cigarettes literally out of high schools. I had some members that wanted to drop the age to 19. Well, I have a lot of seniors who still, believe it or not, that are 19. And if I dropped it to 20, I still would have some. So I think it's really important to get cigarettes in that environment completely out of the high schools. That's the reason it's 21. It's truly that simple.
Well, and from an enforcement standpoint, you know, we do have a regulatory agency that's in charge of going out to make sure that stores are not selling to people under a certain age. 21 is the age that buy alcohol, marijuana. So there's some simplicity and there's some savings, I would imagine, in having a single age that they have to check IDs for, so that the Department of Licensing can have a different look to your driver's license based on whether you're 21 or under 21. So that makes it easier for people to know whether they're complying with the law, and they say they can't sell tobacco, vaping products, alcohol, marijuana.
Do you think that electric cigarettes should differ from normal cigarettes?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Say that again.
Do you think the age for electric cigarettes should differ from normal cigarettes?
To e-cigarettes.
Should electric cigarettes be treated the same as cigarettes?
Interesting. I think for me, yes. The jury on electric cigarettes, I don't think we really know the true impact of electric cigarettes yet. I think it's unknown. I believe that when you vape, what we have learned is when you vape, you're taking in actually it's like steam, and it's far more pleasant and easier on your lungs. So you happen to inhale deeper when you vape. There are less particles, less bad stuff, but what is there goes deeper into your lungs. So the minute amounts that are there, they're going into the very precious, precious tissues of your lung, far deeper than cigarettes. We don't know what that does, and we certainly don't know what the long-term impact will be. I think if you're vaping, you're taking a big chance. I know you're far better off not vaping. Do I know the true impacts of vaping yet? We don't. It took us years to understand the impact of cigarette smoking. So I think, why would you take the chance on vaping? I know that you're taking in butane, formaldehyde in very small amounts. Guaranteed it's not good in those precious tissues of your lung.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Hey, thanks, you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Mr. Tower, for speaking on our behalf in committee, and Mr. Harris, thanks again for coming to our school. You know, that sends a wonderful message to teachers and students that, you know, you're willing to come into schools. Also, I think I really love the lesson that you gave of, you know, kind of letting go of control of who takes credit of something in order for the greater good of passing something. So I appreciate that lesson that you shared with us today, and also for you know, for sponsoring bills that help education. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting us.
Everybody.
Thanks, you guys. It's a pleasure. I'm on the 7th of April, I think.
Oh, hey, I never showed my sign.
Oh yeah, that's other way.
Oh, other way. Hup, hup, hup.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.